Peace, peace. This is Instructor Yasir, and this is episode 1 of the Knowledge of Survival podcast. So, I have to admit, I'm still feeling my way out with how I'm going to do this. Um, I, I don't have plans on making this a um, super well rehearsed or big production type of podcast. I'm really looking at this as being a place where I can just, spill my knowledge when it comes to self defense, martial arts, firearms training, combat ready fitness training, and just kind of put my ideas out there and um, hopefully it resonates with someone. If you're listening to this, hopefully it resonates with you. So I'll take this first episode to just talk about a little bit about my background and what you can expect from this podcast. So what drove me to start this is that over my years of training, I found that there's a lot of myths and just flat out lies that are espoused in the self defense community, and it's sad because it's giving people a false sense of security. It's giving people, um, it's kind of like the whole lose 50 pounds in 5 days type of thing, right? It's like people gravitate towards it because everybody loves the easy way out, but it's just not true. Even if you could lose 50 pounds in 5 days, it's probably not healthy to do that. So it's the same thing that I see happening in the martial arts, self defense, firearms training community. And I see these ideas being espoused by police, former police officers, military guys, martial artists, UFC fighters, it's everywhere, right? Um, Nobody's telling the truth. And I want to be that voice of truth. I want to be that voice of truth where I want to be able to give you the truth, the reality of what it is when it comes to self defense. And I feel like I have a unique perspective that I can share. I do have, some knowledge and expertise that I can share as well. And that's why I'm here. So, a little bit about me. I have been training in the martial arts for what, since 2005. So, almost 20 years. I was still a young man at the time when I first started training, but I was an adult. I was 23 years old. I was 23 years old when I first started. Well, not when I first started training martial arts, but when I started training martial arts seriously. I first started training martial arts as a child. Back in the 80s. Um, you know, yeah, it was the 80s. Yeah, yeah. So it was in the 80s. And I remember, I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and my favorite movie was The Last Dragon. Still one of my favorite movies. I mean, it's just one of those movies that it's one of those things where you love the movie as a child, and it just stays with you your whole life. So love the movie, and my uncle, he was into the kung fu flicks, from the 70s. All the Shaw Brothers stuff, Five Deadly Venoms, all that good stuff, right? Fist of the White Lotus, all that. and Bruce Lee, of course. Of course, he loved Bruce Lee. So he would come over to babysit, and sometimes we would watch those movies. But I gotta say, I was a child of the '80s, so the ones that what had the biggest impact on me when it came to martial arts was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and that movie, The Last Dragon. Um, and so, but through that, I just loved all that stuff, guns and you know ninja swords and weapons, the whole thing. Um, and so my parents put me in a taekwondo school in our neighborhood, and I convinced them that I need a uniform so that I could, uh, really get it, really learn. So they did all that, and I mean, I didn't last in that school for more than a few weeks. I mean, I only have a memory of a couple classes, but I just remember it was a lot of exercise. It was a lot of exercise. We were running around and, we were doing push ups and all this stuff. And all I can remember is that I was like, this is not like what I saw on TV. This is just not what I saw on TV. I wanted to do what I saw on TV, right? I wanted to come out and be a master like immediately. So I didn't have the maturity at the time to stick with it. And my parents, they weren't into the martial arts. So they didn't force me. I mean, that was, they could save their money, right? I mean, if I wasn't going to be serious, they didn't have to keep spending that money. So they let me quit, and I never got into martial arts again as a child, but it was something that I always still kind of had in the back of my head. So at the age of 23, I had just graduated college, not too long ago, a few months, prior. I was working full time. Um, I had started my career in sales. And of course, I was a single man at the time. No children, no wife. So I had the money. I had the money to go and seek out my own lessons and really start to train in something that I thought was effective. So um, I did not care about tournaments. I did not care about tournaments. I wasn't interested in competition. I wanted something that I really felt was going to be something that I could really call on in a real live street situation. If it came to that, um, I wanted something that was for real. I didn't want to train in anything. I didn't want to be a part of any type of tournament school. I didn't want to be a part of anything that was, you know, that just wasn't serious. I wanted to train for real. Um, so I had it was an associate of mine's. So okay, so I checked out a few schools. So I checked out a few schools, went and sat in on a couple of the classes. I'm a person that likes to do the knowledge first, so I like to observe and kind of see the environment, take a look at the instructors, look at the class, look at the students, kind of see what it is, check the vibe out. So I sat in on a few classes, a couple classes at a couple schools, and it was okay. I didn't really find things that I like. I remember I had stepped in on one Hapkido school. Um, I dropped in on some other school, but it was an associate, that I had at that time. I'm not really gonna call him a friend, per se. Um, it was an associate that I had at the time who had who we were talking. It was like man, talking about training and stuff, and he told me that he was training with a fifth dan. He was like, man, I'm training with a fifth dan, and VSK Jiu Jitsu. And man, VSK Jiu Jitsu, it's up under Sanukas, with Dr. Moses Powell, Sanukas. Now, at this time, I had never heard of VSK Jiu Jitsu. I had never heard of Sanukas Rule Jiu Jitsu. I had never heard of Dr. Moses Powell. I had never heard of any of this. So I was very interesting. So he told me about it, and I went online. I went online and started researching, and I learned about Dr. Moses Powell. I learned about VSK Jiu Jitsu and Grandmaster Anthony Muhammad. Um, and man, I was like, okay, I was like, all right, this seemed legit. Like this seemed like what I'm talking about. What I'm looking for. So, brother that I was hanging around at the time, who was getting this training, he was doing private lessons. With this fifth dan, and our who became my instructor, my first teacher. His name is Amir Muhammad, and he's the son of our Grandmaster Anthony Muhammad. Um, and Grandmaster has changed his name recently. I believe that now Grandmaster is going by um, Abdul Aziz, Grandmaster Abdul Aziz Muhammad. So we were training with his son, Amir. And I remember, I went to a class, and we trained, and he's showing me stuff, and we working, and I'm like, okay, this is official. Yeah, I like this. This is what I'm talking about. So I started training. I started training with Amir, and me and this brother, that I was cool with at the time, we were training together. We were training together with Amir, and then him and Amir had a falling out. You know, uh, he was trying to get me to stop training with Amir, based on them falling out, and I wasn't gonna do that. So I kept training. So I kept training with Amir, and I was with Amir for a good year and a half. I got my yellow belt with him. Um, and I remember my first test was crazy. My first test was crazy to me. I mean, it was hours, hours. I tested with Grandmaster. Yeah, I tested with Grandmaster. Amir was there. Some of the other black belts, brothers at the time. Um, this is the system that is taught to the brothers of the FOI, in the Nation of Islam, Nation of Islam in Chicago. So this is the system that these brothers train under, and I was blessed to be a part of that, and be getting this same type of training. Absolutely. So I was in there with them, man, and I took a test. I met a few good brothers over there, and man, that yellow belt test was crazy. It was hours, and I couldn't believe it. It's like the amount of information that you had to know just to go from a white belt to a yellow belt was far beyond most martial arts schools. So it was tough. I had to spar and everything. Um, so it was tough, but it was good. I mean, I was hooked. I'm in, right? I'm in. So anyway, after a year and a half, um, my teacher ends up leaving Chicago to go to New York, and he had to go. He went to New York because he was embarking on some other things, and he told me that I could go train with his father, of course, or there was another instructor in Chicago who um, who was highly skilled, highly skilled. But he had some different you know um, relationships with people. My first teacher wasn't especially fond of him, but he could not deny his skill set. Um, so he told me I could train with him as well. His name is Shihan Lemuel Muhammad, and So um, I took a pause for a few months. I took a pause for a few months after Amir left, and I went and trained for a little bit. Uh, I just kind of popping in and out with Professor Joaquin Jackson, who's also ill, martial artist. He's an Aikido guy as far as his foundation, but he's trained extensively with Grandmaster Anthony. He also got some time with Dr. Moses Powell. So he really combines the Sanukus rule jujitsu with his Aikido. And he's nice. Professor Joaquin is cold. So, um, yeah, so I was popping in and out there, but I never joined his school or anything. I was just kind of trying to find out where I wanted to go. Of course, I wanted to train with Grandmaster Anthony, but Grandmaster's schedule at the time wasn't feasible for me. I couldn't get with him, based on my work schedule. So then the brother who originally put me on, to VSK, um, we were still, cool at the time. So he told me like, well, hey, I'm with Lemuel now. You know what I'm saying? Come check Lemuel out, right? So I went to go check out Shihan Lemuel's school. He had a school over in Riverdale, Illinois, south suburb, just right outside of the city, right outside the south side of the city. And so I went over there and checked it out. And I was like, okay, it's cool. He's official. You know what I'm saying? He's looking at his skill set, he's official. And I became a student there. And Lemuel um, became my primary teacher, became my primary instructor. He is the instructor that I've spent the most time with. And I got my black belt under Shihan Lemuel. So trained with Shihan Lemuel for about 5 years. So about 5 years consistently, 5.5 years, consistently, diligently. And he sent me to Grandmaster Anthony to test for my black belt. A 2 day test. It was hard. It was grueling. It was intense. Um, sparred at the end, of course, with the black belts in the school. 10 rounds, 3 10-minute rounds. So 30 minutes of sparring. First 5 rounds was 1-on-1. Rounds 6 and 7 was 2-on-1. Rounds 8 and 9 was 3-on-1. And the last round, I had to fight 4. I had to fight the 4. And this was a 2 day test. I mean, they work you out like crazy. And they were saying crazy stuff. Like they would say stuff like, you know, 500 jumping jacks, then 300 push-ups, 200, like 200 sit-ups and it's just like you would do, they would say this crazy, they would take you through these crazy workouts just to psych you out. And then in addition to that, you had to do, all these techniques. We had, yellow belt techniques. We had green belt techniques. We had, a bunch of different katas we had to learn. We had a bunch of different throws and locks and sweeps and strikes and kicks, just all kinds of stuff. A very in depth system. And so they try to wear you out. They try to wear you out and just try to get you to quit. Basically, the test is all about. I mean, up until that point, you get to the black belt test, you've already kind of shown improving your skill set for the most part. So the black belt test was really just a matter of, are you going to power through this test? Like, are you going to fight? Are you going to show your fighting spirit? Bushido, right? Are you going to show your fighting spirit? That's really what it was about. Um, so that was that, and I was successful. So that was beautiful, huge, point in my life. Um, after that, I I started doing some teaching on my own. Um, taught some self defense classes, women's self defense classes. Did some stuff at a university in Chicago. Um, had some private students doing some training in Hyde Park. So did my thing for a little bit. Uh, Eventually I'm missing some things, but I'll double well. So let me touch on. So while I was training in VSK, when I got to green belt, uh, as a green belt in VSK, it said that your knowledge and skill set is at the level of a black belt in most other systems. I don't know how true that is. That's up for debate, argument, whatever. But I know that if you get to a green belt in VSK Jiu Jitsu, you pretty serious. I'm not gonna front or lie about that. You're pretty serious. So as a green belt, um, my teacher gave the blessing for me to start cross training, and that is when I started training with my third instructor. Right, this would have been my third instructor, and this is Guru Arthur Chestan, who had been training in Filipino martial arts, Kali, under Guru Ron Bilecki for years. The Dan and the Santos system, martial research systems, all that good stuff. Um, and so I started training with him, learning Kali. And Kali is dope. I love Kali. Stick and knife, empty hand, Dumog, which is some of the ground stuff. Um, Love it. Kali is excellent art. Um, so I trained with Guru Arthur Chestan for a good maybe 3-4 years consistently, um, and got rank in that as well. I tested with Guru Ram Bilecki, so I have some intermediate rank there. I haven't gone beyond that, but I've been meaning to. Um, and then kind of come back current again. So after I achieved black belt in VSK Jiu Jitsu, after I ended up leaving my teacher school for some other things, I went and trained with uh, Sifu Wilbur Rhymes. So Sifu Wilbur Rhymes and Southern Praying Mantis Kung Fu, which is a phenomenal martial art as well. Southern Chinese style martial art, so in that same area as Wing Chun, but still very different. It's got its own thing. I got a partner of mine that's been training Wing Chun for a long time. I may have him show up on the podcast a few times for y'all. And me and him, work out, mess around, and he trained in Wing Chun much longer than me, but much longer than I trained in Mantis. But I get with him. I get with him. I definitely get with him. And you know, it's just a ill art. A lot of nuances. It's hard to learn though. It's hard to learn for sure. It's a hard system to learn, but very ill. I feel like my hand skills, just on some just like fist, like hand skills, striking, structure, all of that was greatly improved by training in Southern Praying Mantis Kung Fu. Um, and, you know, then as far as my training expanded in 2019, right before the pandemic hit. So 2019. So in 2019, I got into firearms. I'd always wanted to get into firearms and gun training. And I felt like, that was the time. So I got into firearms then. And one of the reasons that I wanted to get into firearms and get that knowledge and get, a defensive firearms knowledge is because when I was training people before in martial arts, self defense, I felt like I realized that in order for somebody to call on these skills in a real life stressful situation, they got to train for a while, and be serious and diligent about it, because you got to build up that muscle memory. You have to build up the neural pathways between your brain and your hands and your feet, um, and those natural responses to different things, in order for you to be able to call on that in a stressful situation. Because when a stressful situation happens, you're not yourself. So you have to be able to call on that. And I realized that was going to take a lot of training for people to do that. And I said, what's a way for me to help people in a quicker way? And firearms is a way to do that. Firearms, the gun is the great equalizer, right? A small woman can take down a 450-pound man, 250-pound muscular man with a gun, you know. So that's the great equalizer. So I felt like I really wanted to incorporate that into my training and my skill set as well, and be able to give that information to the people. And so that's what I started to do in 2019. Started picking up my first firearms, first started learning and getting some knowledge surrounding that. And I became a certified firearms instructor with the USCCA, that's the United States Concealed Carry Association, in May of this year. So uh, that's where we're at today. And that's me. That's a little bit about me. That's a little bit of where I come from and my background and training. I've competed. I've been successful, in tournaments, sparring, uh, techniques and all of that. VSK Jiu Jitsu, for those who don't know, by definition, is a mixed martial art. The foundations of it is rooted in traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. So you're dealing with a lot of joint locks, throws, chokes, sweeps, throws, off balancing. There's a lot of karate in it as well. So you got a lot of strikes. You've got, kicks. You've got a lot of boxing philosophy in there as well, and technique as far as the footwork goes. Um, a lot of boxing just in the movement, and how you strike and how you move around. That's all in VSK. Um, there's a little bit of kung fu in there. There's um, judo in there, which, I mean, judo comes out of jiu-jitsu already, so that that's in there. So that's kind of VSK jiu-jitsu. But then there's also a mindset that's attached to it as well. Um, the V stands for Vijitsu Te, under Professor Florindo Visitacion. who is Dr. Moses Powell's teacher. That's where the S comes from. That stands for Sanukas Ryu Jiu-Jitsu. That's a system created by Dr. Moses Powell, who is a legendary, phenomenal martial artist. If you don't know him, he is somebody that you need to know. And then the K stands for Kumite-Ryu, which is coming from Soke Little John Davis, another phenomenal martial artist that you need to know. And the VSK Jiu-Jitsu, just basically, this is Grandmaster Anthony's system. And, essentially all it is Grandmaster Anthony's understanding and his expression of what he learned under his three teachers. His main teacher being Dr. Moses Powell. And through Dr. Moses Powell, of course, he trained with Soke Little John Davis. Soke Little John Davis, Dr. Moses Powell's #1 student. Um, after Dr. Moses Powell left from New York, moved to Georgia, Grandmaster Anthony started training with Soke Little John. All of, Soke Little John and Grandmaster Anthony also trained under Grand Professor Florindo Visitacion, who was Dr. Moses Powell's teacher. That's the Kali Arnis. Arnis Kali, or the Filipino martial arts, is also a part of VSK Jiu-Jitsu as well, because Dr. Florindo Visitacion, Grand Professor Florindo Visitacion, was Filipino. He's from the Philippines. So he grew up training in Arnis. So of course, those techniques, and he took those techniques and melded them with Jiu-Jitsu, and this is what he gave Dr. Moses Powell, and then Doc added his own thing to it. I mean, a great documentary to watch is The Warrior Within. The Warrior Within has got some classic footage of Dr. Moses Powell in there doing things like a one finger rollout, and you can just see the power and the ferocity in what he was doing, back then, man. And yeah, so that's my tree. So that's my tree, man. That's my tree of martial arts. Um, and that's what's informed my approach. I always want to give respect, to my teachers. And yeah. So that's where that's where I come from. So hopefully that has been entertaining for you and enlightening, and just to kind of give you some insight into me and where my background is. I'm a reader. I study often. So I'm going to be, as I learn this information and I start to gain, as I gain an understanding of it, because I'm continually evolving and growing, I'm going to be giving this information to you. And hopefully you find jewels and nuggets that you can use to protect yourself and your family out here, because we're living in a crazy world. And I think that things are going to get more crazy. We've got, quite frankly, some dictators and tyrants that are deciding how things should be run. And in most cases, I don't believe they're in the best interest of the people. I've got a whole slew of political ideas and philosophies as well, that I may incorporate into the podcast as like a, fringe, kind of episode. Like I'll probably title it like, political episode or whatever. Give it some type of title or tag so that you'll know that, hey, this is where Yasir is doing his political rant. So you can decide if you want to, enter those realms of my mind as well, or if you just want to, get the self-defense information. That's up to you. But I think, I'll definitely label the episode, so that if that's something you want to check out, you can. And, drop me a note, check out my website, knowledgeofsurvival.com. And I'm going to have, some online courses available. I'll be doing some classes online. If you're not in my local area, I'm doing private training as well. So we're gonna get it in. We're gonna get it in. My thing is martial arts, self defense, defensive firearms training and use, as well as combat ready fitness. Combat ready fitness is a big thing to me as well. I see a lot of these instructors out here that are out of shape. I don't get that. I don't get how you're going to be a self defense instructor, and you're out here out of shape. And when I say out of shape, I don't mean that you're out here looking, all cut up and, your body, you know, uh, aesthetics. I'm talking about like ability to still perform at a certain level of proficiency, right? So still being able to perform. Um, you know, I think that a self defense instructor should still be able to perform, at a reasonable level. I understand you get older. I understand age, can become a factor. But I think that, you should still be able to reasonably perform. So that's important. So functional fitness is important. I'm not into a bunch of show muscles. I don't care about that. I don't care about no show muscles. I want to, we want to train to be ready, right? We want to train to be ready. And see, by training to be ready, that's going to carry over to other aspects of your life. How you move, being able to play with your children, being able to play with your grandchildren, being able to, still perform intimately with your wife, your girlfriend, whatever. These are all be able to perform at work. These, that fitness carries over, so we want to maintain a reasonable level of combat ready fitness. So we're going to get into all that as well on this podcast. Um, so yeah, so this is the intro, the first episode. Drop me a line. Let me know if you like it. Let me know about some things that you want to talk about. Let me know about some things that you want to learn. And we'll get to it. See you soon. Peace. And when in doubt, train.